Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Shadow and Sun Show. Today, a little something different to go along with the overall theme of the month. And you're probably going to ask, how does this relate? And we'll get to that in just a moment. Today, I'm going to go over not just the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Oriental's Adventures book, which was actually one of my all-time favorite D&D books, but I'm also going to touch on volumes 1 and 2 of Caricature, which were basically just big world books for the day. I mean, today they really wouldn't count as big books. They're both only 96, and the second book was 192. How is that? That doesn't make any sense. Unless they're... Oh, okay. This one actually starts at page... Book 2 actually starts at page 97 and goes on to page 192. So 192 pages together. Together they barely make up a Palladium World book. But let's start off with the first one. My players and Dungeon Masters at the time absolutely loved this book. We were all big fans of the, Saturday afternoon kung fu movies, and we absolutely loved everything about this book. Between the character professions, which were the biggie, almost none of us actually ever ran any of the new races, the spirit folk, and I forget the names of the other ones. They were kind of hard to pronounce. The sort of caveman dwarves and the shapeshifters that could turn into an animal, but they weren't necessarily were creatures. This book came out the same time or around the same time as the Unearthed Arcana, so both books incorporated the comeliness rule, which I actually think was a really kind of important stat to add. I didn't agree with charisma having anything to do with your actual appearance, and it may seem a little shallow or whatever, but how your character looked should really have had somewhat of an impact in the stories that developed around your character. If your character if you low statted your comeliness, then that should actually have an effect on your interactions with the NPCs, especially the opposite sex. I know a lot of people didn't go into those things, and I touched on it last month with the John Carter romance stories and Tarzan and things like that. But for those of you who weren't afraid to do that, it was really kind of important, as well as if your character had a low comeliness score, just walking up to the city gates, you're going to be viewed suspiciously. The professions, and there were a lot of them. And bear with me, this book is very, very old, and it's actually coming apart in a couple of places. The pages have separated. I don't know if you can see that horribleness. I'm going to have to try and find a better copy of this book. The professions, let's see, we start with the Barbarian, which was pretty damn close to the original Barbarian from the Unearthed Arcana. I'd have to go over it, page by page to see if it's identical. But it has the D12 hit points, and a lot of the other abilities. The Bushi, which is basically your basic fighter with different, sub rules. The Kenshi, the Sword Saint or Sword Master. Everybody wanted to play one of those. Just instead of actually playing the Samurai, which I don't know, wearing armor, carrying a katana, they just go together for me. The Monk, which was probably closer to what the monk should have been in the player's handbook, and I know a lot of people absolutely hated the monk, but believe it or not, I had more than half a dozen players play monk characters, and they absolutely just loved them. One old friend of mine actually, he lost his arm as a monk, and he still kept on playing that character for many years, even never being able to get his his arm back through some sort of magic, and that was a testament to his love for the character, not just the profession, but the persona he had developed. What's the next one? The ninja, absolutely, as far as I'm concerned, everybody's favorite character. The great thing about the ninja is it was literally a human split class profession where you were basically kind of like Batman. You're the ninja at nighttime, but during the day you had a completely different character profession, like the Wu Jin, or I forget the other three offhand because I always ran Wu Jin ninjas because magic and ninja abilities. Pff, come on, folks. Absolutely one of the coolest kind of characters you could ever run, in my humble opinion. And then we go on to the samurai, of course, which was another absolutely fantastic, I don't want to say stereotypical, but mainstay of all of the adventures. Then the shukenja, which was basically a priest, I believe, and the sohi, which was, I think, another sort of wandering monk type priest. And then, of course, the Wu Jin, which was just absolutely the best of the wizards prior to second edition. Had so much more going for them. They had some taboos, and it was kind of like a weakness, like maybe they weren't allowed to touch a dead body or something like that you picked. But some of their spells right off the bat at first level were just leaps and bounds more powerful than a regular wizard from first edition. And then, of course, the Yakuza, their version of the organized crime thief, which a lot of people also absolutely love that character profession. They were all, honestly, they were all a lot of fun, and they brought something new. It allowed the dungeon masters in my era to create new areas, new kingdoms that weren't, so European, and it brought, a foreignness or alienness to parts of your world where, you really had to, not be on your guard, but be on your toes to keep up with the cultural, differences, and, rules and regulations, and traditions and all those things. Then this book added the families, clans, and caste system, where, in addition to the honor system, really fleshed out your character, what happened to your character prior to being a first level adventurer, so to speak, and really gave you a lot of background information. You'd roll on these tables and come up with different aspects of the past, your character's past, what they had done, what their family was all about, including how many members in their family there were. Then the honor system, basically, it was kind of like an alignment checklist, or a alignment meter, where you would, if you did certain things, you'd get negative honor, and if your honor got, really bad, then you would face consequences. But to determine your honor, you had tables where you would roll to see, again, more things from your past or your family, including, bonuses that you would have, some extra starting money, sometimes quite a bit of money, or a starting magic item. It was on a percentile table, so the higher you rolled, the better, bonuses and additions you had. The monetary system, it was pretty much just, gold, copper, silver, electrum, platinum, with different names. And the cool thing I always liked about the monetary system was the hole in the center of the coin that allowed you to put your coins on a string or a leather thong, to make it, one, harder for people to steal them, but easier for you to carry them around and keep track of them, so that you could just count them, or tie a knot every 10 coins, so you'd know how much you had, or know how much to just drop off, when you're paying for something. It was all really kind of interesting. And then a whole lot of equipment, much more so than the original player's handbook, and a lot of additions besides what you'd find in the Unearthed Arcana. And a lot of these things we would just transfer over to regular, gold piece values, and use them in any starting campaign. And of course, there was a huge section of weapons, but not just the usual stats for weapons, and the armor class adjustment, speed factors, and things like that, which, as we know, almost no one ever used the speed factor, the armor class adjustment. We tried, but it just slowed things down, and if nobody used it, then it was pretty much fair on both sides of the monsters and the player characters. And for those people who weren't real familiar with a lot of these terms, there were some nice illustrations of different kinds of weapons, as well as the armor, and then individual descriptions of these weapons with another small illustration picture, so that the players could understand what they had and what they were using. And then the proficiency system. This should have always been in the game. I know a lot of people hate the proficiency system. Personally, I like it because it was the closest thing to a skills system, and it gave you more answers to those yes/no questions. Can I do this? Can I do that? Well, you have the proficiency, then you can do it. If you don't, you can try it, but you're probably not going to do so well. And it was kind of for the most part, all this stuff would either later go into the the Wilderness Dungeoneer Survival Guide, or those preceded these books. I'd have to check them out exactly. I thought they came out like toward the end of the original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons history, and it had basically the same rules for the proficiencies and quite a few of them. Then the spell system, or the spell selection, really. These spells, for whatever reason, always seem to be about a half a level more powerful than they should have been, even starting with first level spells. I remember there was a first level offensive spell for the Wu Jin that was just really, really, really powerful in comparison to just magic missile. Obviously, sleep is, always been an overpowered spell. But even, for the priestly class and the wizard class, all of the spells were just really a lot of fun, very interesting, and they didn't skimp on the number of spells. They were really a fair amount all the way up to 7th and 9th level. If you look on the first level spell, there were 30. Obviously, there's some duplications, which was smart on their part, and 32nd, 24, and 24 3rd and 4th level spells, all the way up to 13 for 9th level spells. Obviously included Wish, but it had like Tsunami. Oh, come on, folks. That's just, how many times could your 18th level wizard, enjoy using that spell in a campaign? Especially, since it's a high level campaign, you're probably going to be shipboard, or dealing with larger numbers of monsters, or threat levels are going to be much higher. More combat stuff. A little bit different, not different procedures so much, but it threw in the martial arts, as well as grappling and unarmed combat, because in a lot of these situations you weren't supposed to have weapons whatsoever, unless you were of higher caste ranking. And then one of the last things they put in this book was yearly, daily, and I think monthly and yearly encounters, and as in the way of events, things that would just happen to help keep the story rolling along, and allow for the dungeon master to just throw in, not necessarily horrible threats, but sometimes there were war could have been one of them, but really help the dungeon master develop the story from a more or less day-to-day perspective, when you weren't in the dungeon, things that were going on outside the dungeon, or in the, and yes, they did have daily events, going on in the world around the characters. So it just made it seem, more of a living world. And then not last but not least, monsters. There was a nice section of monsters in here. As you can see, Oriental dragons, and there were several of them. The gargantuan. This is what I was getting at, folks. The gargantuan. If you wanted to throw off or throw in a giant monster that was just absolutely, let's see, what are the hit dice? I can't see upside down. Hit dice 35, 20, 30, and 50. So if you wanted to throw Godzilla, you've got a 50 hit die monster. So that's close to like 400 hit points of monster that you could throw at your little version of Tokyo. If you wanted a giant insect or a humanoid, I guarantee you, Ray Harryhausen, in one movie or another, made a monster just like this. Now I don't know how you would make a miniature of something like that that's 80 to 100 feet tall, but there you have it. That was what I was getting to, and more or less the main reason I put this book, not just because of the monster, but the overall idea of making cultures and towns and countries in your Dungeons and Dragons world that weren't just your typical European sort of medieval fantasy attempts at the the overall feel of your game. You could throw in a whole other country that the players would have to explore and adventure in, looking for that particular magic item, or maybe trying to hire or find some monk up on the top of a mountain. And last but not least, treasures and magical items. There were a lot of really cool magic items in this section. Now, I'm not a lot because there's only about 5 pages of them, but they were some pretty cool magic items, and definitely something to throw your players off. Finding some of these items, and then at the beginning here it starts an overview of a character or tur. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, and then they went on and really expanded on it in these 2 volumes, which I haven't read completely. I was about halfway through the first book when I decided to add this to the lineup this month. But these really flesh out, a world that used all of these rule books in case you didn't have enough experience or didn't know how to run things or how to build things up from the ground. These books are absolutely almost essential. Personally, I like to do everything by hand, make up all the towns, the NPCs, all that stuff. But these 2 books really just, pile it in there for you. You pretty much, have your whole country built from the ground up. Everything you need to know to run an Oriental adventure. And if you haven't, I really recommend, even if you're playing 3rd or 5th or Pathfinder, and you wanna spice things up, literally, and you want to have a country or a nation nearby, or maybe not even nearby, across the ocean or something like that, that's completely different. You can grab these 2-3 books, and you're gonna have everything you need, and it's not a lot of reading. It's compared to some of the newer books that are 400 or 500 pages just for the rule book. You could read through just half of this main book, and you're going to learn everything you need to know to run one of these sort of adventures, or maybe even an entire campaign, which I have a feeling Wizards of the Coast is probably not going to touch on this stuff for a very, very long time for obvious reasons. And it's a shame that they don't have the fortitude to go out and do something like this, like they did back in 1985, because I can tell you right now that this book alone was one of the more popular books after the original Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, Dungeon Master's Guide, and of course Unearthed Arcana. This book was probably more popular than the Wilderness Survival Guide, the Dungeoneer's Survival Guide, and probably even a bit more popular than some of the other, like Greyhawk and Forgotten Realms. But maybe your mileage may differ. For me, this was absolutely one of my top 5 favorite books of the original Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Hope it was one of yours. If you enjoyed it, even if not, let me know why in the comments section. We will be back tomorrow with our first craft of the month. It will be pretty interesting. The little guy and I are each going to do a separate craft based on the same materials. So hopefully you guys will enjoy it. Hopefully you'll have the materials, and you'll have a good time with us. And until then, have a great evening. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, everybody.